Good afternoon, viewers. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Ashley Comerick from Comerick Communications and Beyond the Wine, where we train winery personnel to go beyond the wine and delight their guests so that they become raving fans. And I am joined here today by Matthew Hartman. And Matthew is an entrepreneur, he's a restaurateur, he's a passionate foodie, and he joins us from gorgeous St. Lucia in the Caribbean. Hi, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining today.
Hi, Ashley. What a great introduction. Thank you for that. Makes me sound far more important.
Well, you are important and you're super interesting. We've been talking on the call about what's happening in St. Lucia and the way you're hard at work in this really difficult time, and you're finding a way still to bring pleasure and delight to your guests, the fewer guests though that you're welcoming. But today we're getting together to talk about hospitality and specifically wine and food and wine and pairings, petulant pairings, as a matter of fact. And I'm going to ask you to share. You've had an illustrious career already in some really amazing places. Why don't you share some stories and tell us a little bit about places you've worked that have been really meaningful in shaping your career?
Okay. Well, I started off pretty young. I started off at a young age, and when I first got involved in the industry, obviously I started off in a small capacity as a busboy, picking up classes and whatnot. But I very quickly really enjoyed the work, and I enjoyed the interactions with people, which also helped me overcome some shyness, because I started off a little shy. Anyway, saying all of that, I managed to make it up to some pretty lofty heights in terms of the restaurants I worked in. And when I say that, I was able to reach to the higher end of the fine dining market. And
what were some of the rooms that you managed?
So the restaurants that in Barbados, I worked predominantly on the Platinum Coast, or AKA the West Coast, which is one of the most expensive places in the world, actually, to live and to work. Fantastic. Barbados is a fantastic island, just 90 miles to the east of us, where I am right now presently, and another beautiful island as well. And I was very happy to be part of the exploding culinary scene at the time in the early 2000s, late 90s and early 2000s. And I think I cut my teeth really in fine dining at a restaurant called La Terra. And I met an individual that you know quite well, a gentleman by the name of Irwin, as a result.
Yes.
It's the first place I met him, and we struck an amazing friendship, actually, but that's a whole different story. And up to that point, red wine had been for me red and white and rosé and champagne, and I was just happy to get a good glass when I had asked for one, which was not often, because at the time I was drinking more rum. But as you grow up, so I joined this restaurant. Very passionate owners. Wife ran front of house, husband was a chef. I had a lot of respect for both of them. It was the perfect breeding ground to develop. And they wanted to put together this extraordinary wine program. And I had to fake it initially. I knew nothing about wines, but I faked it. And I realized very quickly that I needed to do a lot of drinking and a lot of reading, and not necessarily both at the same time.
Right. Yes.
Doesn't work. So yeah, and I remember very distinctly that the first wine I ever had was an Oregon Pinot Noir.
Oh, my favorite.
Yeah, and very fruity, very fruit forward. Before that, I'd always been given wine from my family or other people, which was French. And traditionally, a lot of the French wines did not travel well to the Caribbean in the early days, because they didn't have refrigerated
transportation would,
So the wine would come bad and burnt. And so very often the wine that we had, it wasn't because it was French wine, it was just it was burnt or
So what did the guests do? What did the guests do when their beautiful bottle with their fancy French label tasted burnt? Did they say, "Oh, that's wonderful, I love this wine," or did
Well,
they recognize it?
some of them did. A lot of the emperor's new clothes in the early days. It was a lot of that. People just didn't know,
Mm.
and wine was popular, but only popular with those in the know, so to speak. And that's usually people that had a little bit more money, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't as accessible as it is now. Obviously, the wine market has gotten more and more busy over time, but it is encompassing larger and larger parts of the market. And as a result of that, I realized I had a lot of homework. So I started drinking this, and then I started drinking other wines. And quite quickly, I became very passionate. I managed to get myself a WeSet level 2 at the time.
Mm.
And I'm looking to do my 3 right now, although I've drunk enough wines that I don't even know if I need that distinction anymore, although WeSet might say otherwise. And I was happy to have been part of a project which produced the first Wine Spectator Award in Barbados ever. So we produced with our wine list a award of excellence, which at that time in this part of the Caribbean was unheard of, because no one was putting that much wine in their cellars for restaurants because they were worried about dead stock. But we realized very quickly that having a prestigious wine list as well, you needed to be able to sell it. So there was this marriage between being able to command such a great list and then sell it. And that was a massive learning experience for me as a result, because you realize very quickly that you have to school other people that may not know about wine, whilst at the same time not make them feel like they're unintelligent or didn't know. So part of the skills and assets of a restaurateur are being able to, shall we say, coerce the situation in a friendly manner so that everyone comes out feeling good. We
Yes.
have more money in our pockets, they've had a great experience, and they've been introduced to something fantastic. So that was my first. That was La Terra. Now, unfortunately, that restaurant's no longer there as time goes on. And then after that, I became involved with others in another restaurant, which very, very quickly became very popular on the south coast of Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first restaurant that I actually worked alongside some partners to build out completely, called Aqua.
Okay.
And Aqua was a restaurant on the south coast, fine dining of Barbados, which had never been done before. And we were told unequivocally that a restaurant of that caliber would not stand on the south coast, next to the west coast, where I was before. Anyhow, we proved them wrong. A fantastic thing. We got to build up from the ground up. We also built a different wine list. And in this wine list, we wanted a wine list which did not have wines that everyone else had. We wanted quirky, innovative, different wines, most of all, which had a fantastic story.
Oh,
And that we
interesting.
had enjoyed drinking ourselves, because it was more important to us that we had drunk them and enjoyed them to be able to share them with others. And so this was a different aspect. So one was a wine list of accolades, and trying to get people to purchase something of that. And then the second one was actually owning a restaurant and a wine list, which was wines that we like to try, which was not found on any other wine list, and were fantastic in that regard. I mean, it was such an amazing thing to do. Telling people the stories was half the fun.
Oh, isn't it always though? That's where the gold is, in the stories. And so where did you source these quirky wines?
Well, at the time, like I told you, this was the early days where they were really building out the restaurant scene in Barbados. So there were more and more wineries coming, wine merchants. But we had like a particularly at La Terra, for instance, we had access to a billionaire's cellar, because he had enough wines. And this was a billionaire that's quite well known, actually. He's a Canadian. I'm not sure we can mention his name on here, so I will leave that aside.
Probably
Needless to say,
discreet, yes.
needless to say, he owned a hockey team.
Okay.
And we became quite friendly with this guy, and he started selling us wines out of his cellar through an arrangement where we had done 1999, December 31st. We had done his Old Year's or New Year's Eve, depending on where you are in the world. We did a New Year's Eve party for this guy, where this guy brought some of the most amazing wines and bought out the restaurant. It's incredible.
Wow.
Anyways, we formed this relationship, and we had access to this man's wine cellar, which was insane.
Oh my God, I
when
can't
you have
even imagine.
when you have a guy that has this much money, and he's also passionate about wine, And we're like, can you source this? And can you source that? And he's like, sure.
Becomes a bit of a
Um,
challenge and fun. Yeah.
yeah, it was amazing. And then after our relationship with him and Laterra, when I moved on and we did this deal with Aqua at the restaurant there, we had some access to this as well. So we had access to the normal wine distributors, and we also had access to his wine cellar, which gave us quite an advantage.
Right, right. And how did you find the pairings with the food that you were serving? Was it easy to pair
Oh,
those foods?
yes. Once you've got the basics down, um, there's very few absolutely nots, as you know, and because it's such a subjective experience. I can't tell you what you don't like, and I can't tell you what you can enjoy with a wine. However,
Yeah.
there are some guidelines, and everyone tends to follow the guidelines to a certain extent. However, I like to step somewhat outside of those boundaries, um, because I don't like normal. So I don't want to do normal things.
Yes.
I want unique, different experiences and pairings where people will remember it for a very long time afterwards. It is more important to me as a restaurateur that you remember the experience in a positive way, that you've had such a good time. That means more to me than the amount of money you spent, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And if I can forge a relationship, I can't tell you how many relationships I've forged over good wine, and then later in the night, not so good rum. But yes, I forged indeed some great relationships. So it is indeed the social lubricator, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So now you are on another island. You're on St. Lucia.
Hmm.
And you've had some fine dining experience there, I believe, at Cap Martin, at
A
Cap
cat maison,
Maison,
cat
pardon me.
maison.
Yeah, Cap
Yeah.
Maison.
So that
And
was, yeah. Go ahead.
okay, so I'm curious to know now what type of pairings you're doing in your current restaurant, because it's more of a casual dining place. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a seafood grill, comfort food. We like to carry a lot of the classics, so it's you're not going to go away hungry or unsatisfied.
I remember.
Um, yeah, there you go. And one of the things about that is that because it's comfort food, we don't get so frou-frou with the wine. So this time around, what we then were looking for is more approachable wines at a different price point. In this case. Um, which don't approach fine dining and doesn't have the sticker shock that fine dining brings.
Right.
Let's be real, fine dining does bring sticker shock unless you're hugely well endowed bank account, so to speak.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so this was a slightly different project, but what we're going to talk about today is actually some of my own personal experiences with Caribbean
Okay.
food and pairings, which
Let's
is a
go
little different
down
to the
there.
restaurant. You want to go down that
Yeah,
road?
let's go down
Okay.
that petulant road, Matt. Yeah, let's go
Okay.
for some adventure. Tell me.
Oh, okay. Well, first things first, it's quite well known that the Caribbean food does not marry very well, supposedly, with wine.
Okay, and
So
why
for a
is
long
that?
time, people's it's more rum, or it's the spices that they use can sometimes be overpowering,
Mm.
and the seasoning level is also different.
What type of
Salt.
spices typically would you say? Because I know, like
Um,
I've had food there, and I know the food that you're talking about. But for people that are watching that might not have had the pleasure yet to visit the Caribbean or understand, the different flavors that you're talking about, what kind of spices are you talking about?
all right. So besides salt and pepper, which is your seasoning,
Yeah.
we have Scotch bonnet peppers or hot
Mm.
peppers, which are, as you know, very hot. We also have a variant of that we call a seasoning pepper, which is used in a lot of Caribbean cooking because of the flavor it imparts. Um, dare I say, even umami.
Mm.
And I believe you cannot tell this pepper apart from a Scotch bonnet, which is particularly hot. So you can equate a Scotch bonnet with a habanero, a
Okay.
red habanero, about that sort of heat level. And the seasoning pepper looks exactly the same. So I believe that there's some kind of genetic thing which is happening where it's kind of like, it's like an albino. It doesn't have melanin. In this case, it doesn't have capsaicin, or, the things that make it hot. So there's a lot of pepper in cooking, a lot of peppers. We use a lot of spring onion. We use a lot of fresh herbs, but some of the herbs we use you do not have.
Mm.
For instance, there's a herb in the Caribbean called shadow benny, which is called, otherwise known as culantro. And if you want to get an idea of the flavor, just think of coriander or cilantro on steroids, basically.
Oh, really?
Um,
So it's
yeah,
even more intense than cilantro.
it's far more pungent.
Oh, amazing.
And it's used a lot in fish cooking. Yeah, a lot of cooking of fish, especially in Trinidad. They use there's a very famous bacon shark, which is bread and a piece of fried shark and shadow benny sauce in between. It's also found in curries in the curries cooking of the Caribbean, which is
Okay.
from when the East Indians came over in the colonial days, and they left their mark. So there's a lot of curry cooking as well, but the curry is very different to East Indian curries.
Mm.
And they'll use a lot of the spices you can find in the Caribbean versus the East Indian spices, although they use some of the same as well.
Okay.
So
Okay.
some of that.
So a lot of different flavors than we're used to in a standard formal dining room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When people think of West Indian cooking, everyone seems to think it's over the top spicy or it's very heavily flavored. We believe in flavored food, as colorful as our islands and the dress code that we have, and is also reflected in our food and our personalities. So this has become
The
a bit of a
intensity of
challenge.
the intensity of the light there that makes people happy,
Yeah,
just like your
vitamin
food.
D is vitamin D, vitamin D, vitamin D, no skin cancer, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, people are shied away from that. So people generally drink beer and rum
Mm-hmm.
on islands. Rum being a very forgiving spirit with food, whether you're drunk or not. So, yeah. So I started exploring, I wanted to try things. And unfortunately, they did not match the standard rules of food pairing.
Oh
So,
my. Then
and
what happened?
oh yeah, then I became petulant. And I just decided to try some different things. So I have two things to try for you guys to try. Very different
Okay.
stuff. So the national dish of St. Lucia is a green fig and saltfish salad. I don't know if you know what that is, but
I've
so
never
saltfish,
had
obviously,
that. I've never had
right.
green
So,
fig and saltfish salad.
okay, very famous and very popular, especially if you do it well. So green fig, like the banana. So it's the unripened version of that, which has been boiled. And saltfish, which has been the salted cod that you're familiar with, the Portuguese style,
Yeah.
which is very popular in the Caribbean, especially all through the colonial times, because it was one of the few fishes that could make it to the Caribbean without going off,
Right.
because of the preservation technique. And so that is made into a salad with onions, seasonings, and chopped green fig, and is salty, starchy, and generally unforgiving when it comes to pairing wine. However,
Sounds it. Yeah.
however,
Yes, yes.
I have found that an off-dry Riesling works fantastically with that.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, I'd have to say, don't go heavy on the hot sauce, the pepper sauce for that. Although people tend to with that particular dish, but yes, you won't be able to go hot on the hot sauce. If you go with a hot sauce, it gets too hot. You won't be able to taste anything, obviously. So that's my first. I encourage every one of you to try that. And if you want, I'll forward you a recipe for the green fig and saltfish. Maybe you can let your viewers and readers see.
I would
Um,
love that, Matt. Yeah, Matthew, thank you.
Not a problem. Not a
Yeah.
problem. And that's the first. Now the
Okay.
second one, I was debating between talking about a type of curry dish that we call roti, which is a curry which is done and wrapped in a wrap,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be flavored with many different meats. Chicken, fish, shrimp, beef, and vegetables. Very popular dish in the Caribbean, especially in Trinidad and Guyana, or jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can we do
jerk
both?
is I want to do jerk first.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that people think that jerk food, again, very heavily seasoned and spicy, but they believe that it's overpowered, will overpower any wine. And that can be true, but I have found that a fruit-forward Pinot Noir, New World, will do the trick quite nicely.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
So you
Low
were
tannin, low
mentioning,
tannin, low tannin. It has to be
okay,
low tannin. Some
all
people have
right.
told Merlot, but I would not use a Merlot. I am very fond of Pinot Noir, so it's my calling for red wine. So
Oh, I hear you. And I think it's that maybe that spice in the wine that is, speaking to the spice in
yeah,
the jerk spices in the
and
dish.
the tannins are low, which do not overwhelm or compete on the
Mm,
taste, but on the palate, so to speak.
how interesting. And the two wines that you've just mentioned, the off-dry Riesling and the Pinot Noir, we have those right here in British Columbia. So we're 2 for 2 and we
I
can
did
we can try this.
I did my homework. I did my
Not by
homework.
chance, I see. Okay, good.
Well, I did my homework, and I just so happened that I realized that you carried those wines, which is fantastic. So your viewers will appreciate that, I think. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, and then the final one is curry, roti, like I told you. Now, roti is an interesting dish. It's generally made in Trinidad and Guyana, and they're extremely passionate about that. In fact, like roti is a religion in food circles, and
Mm.
if it's not a Guyanese or a Trinidadian roti, then forget it, kind of thing.
Ah.
And it has a unique flavor. It's a West Indian curry. Um, it marries very well with. Sorry, I just dropped my phone. My apologies.
We're back.
Yeah, it works very well with all types of meat and seafood, but predominantly, like I said before, it's beef, chicken, fish, or shrimp.
Okay.
Generally, these are the ones.
Okay.
Um,
And you got
uh,
vegetables in there too with with the
it's
spices.
potatoes, spices, sometimes chana, which is chickpeas, a type of curry
Oh,
chickpea.
yeah.
They will have mango chutney on the side, or several types of chutney on the side.
Nice.
So yeah, these kind of things. And now, depending on the type, I mean, obviously, I would not recommend a white wine with a beef roti. That would be sacrilege. And even for what we're discussing today under petulant pairings, it would not work. I'm
Beyond
sorry.
petulant, then we're not even
Yeah,
going to
this is
talk about that. Okay.
yeah, this is beyond purgatory.
So,
Um, straight to hell. Straight to hell.
okay.
Um,
Okay. So what are you going to
so
put with that beef
well,
roti?
I wouldn't try to match the beef roti. However, with the shrimp and the fish roti,
What are you going to serve with that? Are you going to get beer with that?
with a beef roti, yeah,
Yeah.
I recommend a nice hoppy beer for sure. Nice
Hmm.
cold hoppy beer. There's a few Indian beers like Cobra and these types which are built for curries. They also work very well with West Indian curries. So any of the Indian IPAs or pale ales, etc.,
Okay.
work very well with
Excellent.
that. For the shrimp and fish, now if it's not a heavily seasoned or a heavily spiced roti, as in it's not heavily, when we say spiced here, we mean spicy,
Mm-hmm.
hot,
Right. Okay.
which is different to spicy, as in with lots of spices, right?
Right. Got it.
Um, if it's not overly spiced, then I have found that you can sometimes get away with an unoaked Chardonnay with the fish roti. And again, I would recommend a off-dry Riesling. Yeah, off-dry Riesling. Oh, my phone. I'm sorry. So off-dry Riesling for that as well. The others are difficult. These foods that we're talking about are exceptionally difficult to pair with wine. And you will need to play around with the actual make and brand of wine as well, because even that is important to this.
So you're
So
saying that you can't really pair with these foods unless you're petulant.
I would, yeah, to a certain extent, and you're going to have to play around with a few different styles of the same type of wine. So
Mm-hmm.
an off-dry Riesling, yes, or a fruit forward Pinot Noir. yes, I would not try, for instance, a Burgundian wine. I wouldn't use a Burgundian wine for my first pairing as the Pinot Noir. It just would not work. I
Okay.
would definitely use a Californian or something from Oregon, or even something from New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the Canadians I've had of recent, I have had a few actually, I have to say, work very well as well. Slightly different style, and you'll have to play around with it. Again, it has to suit your palate, right? So it's what your
Mm-hmm.
palate really likes. So the only way you're going to have a lot of fun is trying this out. So
Amazing.
trying the
Well,
foods. Yeah.
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 That sounds like a fun adventure. And if you are willing to share some recipes, I think we can make that happen. We can all try it out. That would
Yeah,
be
why not?
amazing. Yeah,
Why not?
yeah.
Definitely. I think yeah, what I'll do is I'm gonna get my best Trini roti recipe from one of my friends. I can't even say who that person is.
Okay.
They're shaking. They would kill me. Um, because
Well,
she's giving
maybe.
away family secrets. She's giving away family secrets here, so we have to be careful,
Oh,
right?
wow.
The green fig and saltfish salad, that's an easy one, and very
Okay.
easily found here, so I can get that. That's not a problem.
Amazing, amazing.
I hope some of these are your viewers will enjoy as well, because they're vastly different to what you're probably used to. And some of the food, and that's what I wanted to talk about today, was food that you guys maybe are not used to, but are willing to try a little something different.
Well,
And the fun's in the trying, right? So
yeah, that's what it's all about, being petulant, pushing the limits. And that's the point of that is like, just really trust your palate, be adventuresome, try something different. And the point being, we don't want to alienate people from trying wine, from approaching different types of pairings. And there isn't a right and a wrong way. The
I
idea
agree,
is,
100%.
you like what you like, and what you like, that makes it good. So that's your
Well,
good choice.
you were, when I read, like when you asked me about this, to do this with you, when I read through what your sentiments and your thoughts were, I was like, yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's the reason why I decided to do this with you. It's because you share some of the same things, and I prefer something a little quirky. I don't want to be mainstream, middle of the road. I want it to be a little out there, because that's
Mm-hmm.
where the fun is. The fun is where you're not sure, and it's not as sure, and things are a little bit more different. And you're taking a risk by opening this bottle of wine and trying it with this type of food. But hey, I'm gonna have fun doing it, right? So,
It might work out better than you could have even imagined.
of course,
Yeah,
of
kind of
course,
like life, right? You gotta take a leap of faith and give it a try.
push your
Yeah,
comfort zones. Push your comfort
yeah,
zones.
yeah, yeah. And we're doing a lot of that now, with COVID and being in confinement, sort of, to certain degrees. And so, yeah, having some fun and pushing limits and pushing past these barriers that, we might be limited in our travel, but we can certainly experience some of the flavors of places that we'd love to have been traveling to right now by,
Exactly.
through these recipes and through your stories and the wine pairings, your petulant pairings, Matthew. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. And
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I'm grateful, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with the community here. Yeah,
Absolutely, my
thank
pleasure.
you.
I hope you find something really good with it.
Thank you so much. We will be in touch soon.
Okay.